Well, I was counting down in my head, but whatever. Okay. KLON, Los Angeles, Clone Radio. We play the songs that sound more like everyone else than anyone else. Clone. Hey, all right, it's Kip Casper, Clone Radio, LA's Infinite Repeat. How we feeling out there? How's your drive time commute? I need a saga. What's the saga? It's songs for the deaf. You can't even hear it.
Welcome to the Essential Albums podcast, where two guys from AP5 have a conversation about some of the biggest albums ever and forgotten favorites from yesteryear. We'll dive into an album's place in culture, discuss its merits, and decide if a record holds up and is worth your time. Of course, we get into a lot more than that, so join myself, Gordon, and longtime friend Anise as we dive into our favorite albums and relist some of the classics. All right, so this week we're talking about the third studio album from Queens of the Stone Age, Songs for the Deaf. But due to some technical difficulties on Ryan's end, he won't be joining us, unfortunately, tonight. So it'll just be me and Anise for this week. So how's it going, Anise?
Good. How you doing?
Pretty good. So I guess this is the third episode of our Dave Grohl, 3-week tour or through line. So you were the one that picked this album or picked the date. The three albums. So why did you pick? Why did you want to end on this Queens of the Stone Age album for Dave Grohl?
Well, I just wanted to talk about three different albums, but I picked this Queens of the Stone Age album because, for one, Queens of the Stone Age is probably my favorite current working rock band. Them probably along with like Arctic Monkeys maybe. Mm-hmm. And this album specifically has just always been one of my favorites. It's always been part of my regular rotation of albums that get played. It lends naturally to being put on during a road trip. It's almost like you have to do it at this point. Like it's almost like it was made for it. And it's an album I've always loved, and it just felt like it's a classic album that people should know about, and just want to talk about it a little bit.
I totally agree. For me, it was one of those. I guess my first experience with this album was seeing the music video for No One Knows, and then it wasn't really until Go With the Flow where I was like, okay, I'm really digging this track, so I got to go pick it up. So I think I bought the album used, and once I heard it, that I played it once, listened to it through from beginning to end, and I was hooked. And after that, I was a Queens of the Stone Age fan. What was your first experience with this album, or Queens of the Stone Age, I guess?
Well, the first time I heard Queens of the Stone Age was with the lost art of Keeping a Secret from the previous album, Rated R. Mm-hmm. It was one of those songs where, like, it was at the time where nu metal kind of rose to prominence, and I was, kind of getting older. And we kind of discussed in previous episodes after 2000, we're kind of getting into like different types of rock music or just music in general. And then and this song would come on Much Loud, which is a show I was watching at the time, because I wanted to hear, Deftones and Korn.
Right.
But then they threw in, but then they would throw in kind of different stuff. And this is one of them, along with some of the screamo, emo, that kind of stuff is also being played. So it's kind of exposing me to different sort of heavier stuff. But then at the same time, they were also getting played on shows like The Wedge, which was more of like the indie rock or just kind of not your mainstream stuff. So for me, I kind of discovered Queens of Stone Age that way. And then it was, jump online, do a search. I would slowly download songs from Rated R. I remember, you'd hear, what's that called? The Nicotine, Valium, Vicodin.
Feel Good Hit of the
Summer. And then, Monster in Your Parasol. And after I downloaded like 3 or 4 songs, I'm like, fuck it, I'll just download the whole album. Ended up burning it, buying it shortly after. And then I heard the news, like, oh shit, like Foo Fighters taking a break from recording their new album. Dave Grohl's gonna jump behind the drum kit again for the first time in however many years to play with Queens of the Stone Age. And I was like, oh shit. Like, I didn't even know there was a connection there. And all of a sudden, like, a rock star I grew up with was jumping on to play drums in this band that I thought was, hip and like underground or whatever. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then the first song I actually heard was the song, it was on the album, it was just called Millionaire, but I remember it was on the Triple X soundtrack. Nice. You think I ain't worth $1, but I feel like a millionaire, but it was just called Millionaire. And I remember just sort of online, people were like, oh shit, there's a new Queens of the Stone Age track. I put it on. I'm like, oh man, that's not the same singer. Right? It's kind of a different singer. So I didn't really know the story behind that, but I'm like, I dig the song. And then shortly after the album came out, and I bought it pretty much upon release. And I just remember throwing it in and hearing that song again opens the album, but it's kind of in a different lens because now you have the car starting, that radio voice comes in, introduction, and then the song kicks in. And then the whole album just felt like a journey. So I just kind of fell in love with it right away. I was instantly hooked onto that radio concept, road trip concept. And pretty much ever since, I would say I got into them with Rated R, but it wasn't until I bought this album where I truly became a fan and I was kind of in 100%
Right. Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah, I didn't know him before, like with Rated R before this album. So when I saw No One Knows, I saw Dave Grohl was like the drummer in it, and I'm like, oh shit, like this is what he's doing now. Like it was a nice change to see him there. He's not like the central figure in the band. So that caught my eye. So and then that video was played like nonstop, so it was hard to miss that song. So that was ultimately my first exposure, and then I want to say I probably bought the album. I bought it used in 2003, like spring 2003, and then I went out and I think in 2004, maybe it was end of 2003. That's when I went out and bought Rated R. So by the time, what was the album that came out after that? Lullabies or
Lullaby, Paralyzed, whatever.
yeah, right. So when that album came out in 2005, I was like, I bought that like day of. I was ready to go, and I was certainly a fan at that point. One quick question I want to ask you though, when you might have mentioned this, I might have missed it. How did you find out about like Rated R? Or, like, was it just a music video for Lost Art of Keeping?
Yeah, it was just Lost. It was funny because I first saw the video for Lost Art of Keeping a Secret, and when I first saw the music video, I was like, "This looks like Candlebox." The Candlebox music. I can't remember the song name, but which is a Canadian Candlebox Canadian band.
I think so.
Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys, I believe, was a guitar player. I could be wrong. I could be confusing me, but whatever. Yeah, so that was from that song, and then actually one of the things that made me want to check out the band was the album name being Rated R. The album cover looked cool, so I slowly was like I said, was checking out songs and kind of, and then the Dave Grohl thing. So it was just sort of like I kind of heard about them probably because they were growing in popularity, and part of it was being played on shows like that. Because I don't even think their debut album, I don't even think was released in Canada.
Yeah, I remember kind of seeing it on the shelf because it's kind of got that classic cover with like the woman or whatever. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I never owned that one. I think I finally heard it like more recently, like in recent years, and it was probably on a streaming service. Like I hadn't owned that album.
The only place I ever saw it was like the downtown record store in our town called Encore Records. They had it there, but it was an import, and it was like $35 or $45 or something. And I was just like, I was a student. I love the band, but I'm like, I'm not going to dish out for this. I had it downloaded at that point. I didn't buy it until they did like a re-release years later, and then they toured it with the re-release, and I saw them on that tour.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I kind of got the full album release feel of it because I bought the album and then went to go see it live. So it was kind of a cool experience to kind of, it was an older album, but just to experience it in that way, it was almost like born again.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool that you're able to experience that like retroactively.
Yeah. I'm sure it was different, like a different live group and stuff at the time, but I don't know, it was still good the way it was.
Right. Now, you said you've seen these guys like a bunch of times. Did you happen to see them on the Dave Grohl tour? Do you know if he toured in Canada?
No, I didn't see them for the first time live until they did the tours for Lullabies to Paralyze when they were touring. It was actually a cool tour. It was kind of like a dual headliner. So it was Death from Above opening for Queens of the Stone Age, and then closing was Nine Inch Nails.
Oh,
Phenomenal. It was a phenomenal show, and I remember me and my brother went, and we kind of bought the tickets last minute. Like we weren't planning on going, and I just saw tickets. I think it was on Kijiji. I'm like, some guy's selling tickets, $80 a pop. You want to go? And he's like, okay, let's go. So we drove to Toronto, no tickets, met the guy outside of the venue, bought it off of him, and then we were sitting beside him inside because he had bought 4 tickets and
gotcha.
Told us the 2. And I'm pretty sure they were like tripping out on drugs the whole time. Like they were just like sitting, because we were in the seats and they're just sitting beside us, just like rocking back and forth. And they kept leaving to the bathroom and coming back.
Oh my God. Yeah, they're having their own desert session.
Yeah, pretty much.
So were they good seats?
It was they were pretty good seats. It was the
Like what venue? Sorry, what venue?
it was at the ACC, but
Okay, okay.
it was like front row right before the floor, kind of on the curve. So we were still sort of back far away, but we were high enough that you kind of had a good angle to the stage. We just weren't close enough, to make out what colors eyes the bass player had, but
Right.
but it was good. It was a good time. Like it was a good first. Like I've seen him since, and probably the other experiences are a bit better because I'm on the floor and much closer. But it was still a great show.
Yeah, well, yeah, $80 for those three bands. I do that.
Have you ever seen Queens of the Stone Age live?
No, the only one of those three bands I've seen is Death from Above. But yeah, that's I guess one of my big regrets is not seeing Queens, and I haven't seen Nine Inch Nails either. But
Yeah, that's surprising because for me, I saw them on the Lullabies tour, the Era Vulgaris, the Like Clockwork, and then the re-release of the self-titled. I saw them Crooked Vultures. I figured you would have tagged along for at least one of them. I'm surprised.
yeah, no, it's so weird that I didn't. I mean, if it was during the college years, like up until about '07, I was kind of MIA or whatever. But
I guess
at least
my,
one of those tours, yeah, it's a little bit strange.
I guess my concert buddy for anything Josh Homme related is usually my friend Emma. I think she's come with me to all those shows, like them Crooked Vulture shows, Eagles of Death Metal shows. Like,
That's funny.
yeah.
So I guess this is a good time to ask, what is your current relationship like? It sounds like you've obviously kept up with them throughout
Yeah.
the years.
Well, like I said at the beginning, they're probably like my favorite current, like working like rock band, like that's still making like kind of pure rock. So
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of like I obviously have kept up with them, seen them live. I love anything Josh Homme. Like I'm a big fan of all of like the projects he's worked on. Even like the new Royal Blood album that came out last week, where he produced it, sounds great. It kind of has me kind of looking forward to their next stuff because Villains, they had Mark Ronson producing, kind of gave it a more bouncy feel, and just kind of hearing how he channeled, like it sounds like you can hear some stuff that he learned mixed with kind of his more classic stuff on the Royal Blood album. So I'm kind of interested to hear him bring it back and get a Queens of the Stone Age album with, whatever he learned from Mark Ronson. So uh, I'm looking forward. Like they're a band I'm always kind of paying attention to.
Yeah.
How about you, Gordon?
Yeah, no, I would say I've kept up with from pretty much this album on, or from about 2003 on, up until I didn't listen to their most recent one, Villains, up until this week for the first time from beginning to end. I mean, I obviously heard the singles on the radio because they're pretty big, but I did listen regrettably for the first time. I listened to it this week, but it's one of those albums. It seemed like it came out like last year, but it came out in 2017, so I totally lost track.
Even for me, when I was listening through the discography this week and I got the Villains, I was like, holy shit, it's been like 4 years since this. Like it felt like it came out maybe not last year, but it felt like it came out 2 years ago or something. And
Yeah,
then,
no, I completely agree because when I bought, I did buy like Clockwork, and that felt like it was like I want to say like a 2015 album, but that was 2013, June 4th, 2013.
like
So I guess I stopped buying CDs a lot further back than I remember.
like even going through the discography, it's kind of like shocking. Like between Songs for Death and Lullabies is 3 years, between Lullabies and Era Vulgaris is two, and then it goes to six between that and like Clockwork, and then four between that and Villains. So everything is spaced out, but since they have so many projects and we've gotten re-releases and live shows and desert sessions and Eagles of Death Metal and them Crooked Vultures, it seems like they're always around.
Mm-hmm.
So like they've been around for like a long time now, like over 20 years now. And it seems like they should have more albums, but they don't. But it's kind of a good thing because you're not kind of being beat to death with Queens of the Stone Age, but they're always sort of relevant because Josh Homme's always around.
Right. Yeah. Do you think like Josh Homme kind of saves his best work for Queens of the Stone Age?
Yeah, I
Like
think so.
he wouldn't jump into the studio if he didn't have an album.
Yes, I think that's 100%. And it seems like Queens of the Stone Age, like they've been able to develop a sound, and like they pretty much have a subgenre named after the type of music that they specifically make with the whole
Right.
stoner desert rock thing. And but they've been able to evolve and sound different from album to album, but still kind of keep the essence of that desert rock, which is pretty much just like an amalgamation of, garage rock, psychedelia, jam rock, like metal, and even like some 90s grunge in there. Like it just seems like they wear just a bunch of different eras of music, and they're able to jump from, I don't even want to say genre to genre. It's almost like they're jumping from subgenre to era to, like, they do a bunch of stuff in like individual songs. They'll go from a jam band part to a psychedelic part, but it's all still Queens of the Stone Age. And
Right.
every album is still able to sound unique. Like it's almost like they use different production techniques and different sort of gear, distortion, sounds, guitar tones on every album to keep them like pretty distinct in themselves, which is a hard task to do for a band that's more or less just making straight up rock music, and but still able to evolve and stay true to themselves. It's quite the feat.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask that. Like, do you think Queens of the Stone Age have a sound? Like, you were kind of answering it, but like, I mean, you hear this album. There are sounds on it like that are very almost like harsh and aggressive or heavy sounding, but at the same time, it's still accessible. Like they seem to toe that line perfectly, where it doesn't like alienate maybe like maybe not somebody who's into hard rock or who doesn't know who Caius is or anything like that. You can still kind of pick this album up, and you're still
Yeah,
digging.
because the only other it's funny because they're tuned down, like the guitars are tuned heavier than your average sort of rock band that you normally get. And the
Hmm.
only other bands that have really been commercial and done that is like Soundgarden and like Smashing Pumpkins have done it on albums, but other than like new metal was the only other type of music I could think of that was tuned down and being played on the radio. Like there's probably other jazz stuff or whatever where they would use other tunings, but
Right.
it's not all the time where you get something this sort of heavy. Like they have a really like chugging and deep sort of bassy guitar sounds. It's not something you regularly hear. And like them, like you were saying, whenever they have an album out, their singles usually get played to death on the radio.
Yeah, yeah. It seemed like, well, the last album were like, well, all their singles, like whatever the lead single is, you're guaranteed to hear that song
Oh
pretty
yeah.
much like a ton that year, and then like throughout the years coming up, like it never really goes away once it's out
Oh
there.
yeah, because like I remember hearing like Little Sister a lot when the next album came out, and then
Sick,
hearing
sick, sick.
Sick Sick Sick, hearing what's the name, Ocean from Like Clockwork. I Sat by the Ocean. I remember hearing
Yeah,
that a lot.
I
So
really like My God Is the Sun. That's a good
yeah, yeah. So like they're like the radio loves them, and it makes sense because like what we kind of we're talking about last week with Foo Fighters, like pure sort of guitar rock, distorted guitar rock music isn't really well represented anymore, especially in the mainstream. There's only sort of few bands when they release an album, they'll get like that crossover, a little bit of that crossover success. And Queens of the Stone Age is one of those bands that still, when they release an album, it gets attention, their singles get played. And like even listening to a rock radio station now, like Queens of the Stone Age will be one of the only bands you hear with like a guitar in it, like a distorted guitar in it,
one.
when it comes to like newer rock bands. It's kind of coming back now a bit, like you're getting more of it, which is kind of exciting. So it's kind of interesting to see where they go now in this next. It seems like rock music is kind of resurging in a weird way. It's like sort of bubbling right now. I have like my spidey senses are tingling, so I'm kind of interested to hear what they'll do within that.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to kind of throw like a weird sidebar onto that, I hope with the pandemic, like all my favorite bands have had time just to kind of like jump in a studio, quarantine together, do whatever you got to do, and just make music. Like hopefully this year and next year we just have like releases from like every single band we've talked about on the show.
Like it seems like every week you're just seeing like a new news thing where it's like this band is back together. This band is working on a new album for the first time in 7 years. Like this, like it seems like a bunch of bands are just sort of probably just from being sitting at home reevaluating things, or just like, hey, let's do this again. Like even today, I was listening to the new album by that Canadian band, the Born Ruffians, and they've been releasing stuff consistently, but I kind of haven't really listened to them. And I'm like, oh shit, they released an album in 2020 and then another one in 2021. Like these bands are still being active. I guess they just haven't been on my radar, but it's good to see that some bands are, or just artists in general, have just been working away, not just sitting at home twiddling their thumbs.
Yeah, and I guess yeah, you kind of see the opposite of that, where you get like like a duo like Daft Punk breaking up, but then they quickly announced like, no, we're gonna be doing solo stuff. Like we're looking forward to this. So
Yeah.
it still seems to be all good. I mean, it's sad that Daft Punk's no longer around, but like those guys are still gonna be very active.
Yeah.
So I guess this can move us on to some song questions. So there were three singles from this album. They were No One Knows, Go With the Flow, and First It Giveth. Did First It Giveth have a music video? I don't remember seeing it.
It had a video. It kind of came out, I think, near the end of this album's run, and it was just sort of live footage, sort of cut together. Yeah,
that would make sense because I remember like the first two, like No One Knows and Go With the Flow. Those were constantly on Much Music.
Oh yeah, those were played to death. Like it got to the point with with No One Knows where I almost got like sick of it and just seeing that video all the time. Like I love the song. Like now it's been enough time where I don't have that, where it wasn't being played every freaking day multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
Especially back then, I would sit at home and just have Much Music on TV, and it would come on like almost every hour. So you kind of got sick of it after a while. But the album was full of so many good songs that there's always a different song to jump onto.
Yeah. So I guess we can jump ahead. Would you call that one the most overplayed if you had to give that label to a song in here?
Yeah, at the time it was like, and even Go With the Flow became overplayed because I guess this album was just so big. I don't know if it was just in Canada. Like I was looking, I guess it went like number 51 in the US on the Hot 100, but in Canada, I couldn't really find the numbers for that. It just seemed like it was being played constantly to the point, and even like going forward, like even Little Sister was played a lot on the next album. But yeah, No One Knows was definitely overplayed, and I was even shocked that it was a single because it didn't come out until like a month after the album or a few weeks after the album release. I was sort of shocked that it was a single. Like it makes, looking back now, it looks like it was a slam dunk and it all made sense, but at the time it wasn't really the one that jumped out to me while listening to the album.
Right.
Not that it's a bad song. Like don't get me wrong, it was like sort of like almost like a break because it was more of like the spastic guitar. It wasn't really that stoner rock that they're known for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it does sound kind of unique. Like, I mean, throughout this album, you hear songs where there's like they're changing it up throughout and stuff like that. But you're right, that song kind of does stand out in a way where, I mean, do you think it was made to be a single, or it was just like whatever, let's jam and figure this out?
I don't think that they're a band that makes singles. Like they don't seem like the band that's like, oh, let's work on this one to be, to go number one on the charts because like it didn't go number one on the charts. Like it's and they have other songs, like especially on it seems like on Era Vulgaris they did more of that sort of spasticky riff rock that's on this song, like the 4 to the floor sort of deal.
Right.
But yeah, I forget what you asked, but
yeah, I don't even remember. I just actually saw a weird fact. I don't know if this is still accurate or not, but apparently this album only went gold in the United States and it went platinum in Canada.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, we'll continue to show love for Queen.
Yeah, I feel like Canadians just are more like rock. Because even when I saw them, me and a friend of ours, Vince, went to go see them, and it was in Hamilton, which a lot of bands go to Hamilton, but it was because they were sort of touring everywhere at the time. Like they had a Hamilton show, a Toronto show, a London show, which normally a band that comes to Ontario won't necessarily hit all three spots. But I guess Canada has love for the Queens of the Stone Age because they played Hamilton. Cops calls.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. I always thought they're bigger, but I think we've run into this kind of scenario before where I think with Arctic Monkeys where we're like, aren't they popular? And then we kind of like do a little research and you find out, well, maybe in Canada they are, but not so much not as big in the United States.
And in UK obviously for Arctic Monkeys. And I think even Queens of the Stone Age, because it seems like they get a lot more play in the UK as well. Like just reading through their Wikipedia for albums, they seem to chart better in the UK.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess, going back to the original question, I would agree. I thought when this album came out, No One Knows was certainly not, I mean, I was down with the song the whole time, but if I had to give the overplayed label, I would give it to that song because that song was big. But it's been like a bunch of years have passed, so when I hear it now, I think it's a great song. Like it's good to hear it again. Like I've warmed back up to it.
Yeah, and it's one of those songs when you put it on, even if there's people in the room or in the car or wherever you're putting it on that don't even, who might not necessarily know who Queens of the Stone Age are, they'll usually know that song. So it kind of, it's like a fan favorite. You know, you can't go wrong with it. You can throw it on like a party mix, or you can throw it on during a barbecue, and you know everyone's gonna get some sort of everyone's gonna be familiar with it and generally like it.
Yeah, yeah. Funny story. Just before I did the podcast, I let my wife. I put the headphones on my Katie, and I was like, "Here, listen to this." And I just played the first track, and she's like, "Yeah, it sounds like the radio." And then all of a sudden, like once everything picked up, she would just like all of a sudden stop bobbing her head. She's like, "This is really intense." And then I'm like, "Well, here. What about this? You'll know track two." And then when she heard like no one knows, then she's like, "Okay, back into it." But like yeah, that scream right off the top, it was a little off-putting for her, but she knew the singles. Like she still knew "Go with the Flow" and well, yeah, just those two. She doesn't
Yeah,
know.
that's actually one thing they talked about. They wanted because I remember on the DVD, because I had the version of the CD that came with the bonus DVD that had behind the scenes recording stuff and live footage. And then it Josh Homme talks about like the eclecticness of the album, like having that opening track that's like screaming, and you have three different vocalists and a bunch of different. They tried to touch a bunch of different genres, and they were saying they want, obviously the whole idea is that you're flipping through the radio while driving.
Mm-hmm.
You have to change your radio station because you're driving through different radio signals. And then that was supposed to be the way of tying all the songs together, even though they don't necessarily have a through line or have like a, you know, you have your, to make them all cohesive.
Right.
So I thought it worked. I liked it. I thought it brought the album together. I thought it was a good through line. And but the I still think the songs sound like this. They don't really sound like they're different bands from song to song, but
Yeah, no, I agree with like I think when you listen to this album, it definitely has like its own distinct sound, and all the tracks fit on it. Like there's nothing out of place other than maybe the hidden track, like Mosquito Song or whatever. But it's a good closing song. It makes sense, and it is a good way of tying the album together. Just kind of a snippet. The only thing that sucks about that is like when you play like No One Knows at the end, you get like what is it? Is it the Spanish announcer or whatever? You kind of get that at the end, so you have to look out for maybe the radio single if you want to put it on a playlist.
yeah, just keep it on there with the talking.
Yeah,
It's pretty funny. Like before we started recording, I was like quoting all like the radio DJ stuff. I don't know,
right.
some of that stuff makes me laugh. Like my favorite is that whole line of it's like, this next song's about being a millionaire, something you'll never be.
Yeah,
It's so great.
that's pretty funny. That guy just sounds like a complete like d bag, so it fits.
It works.
So I guess would you say No One Knows was the biggest song, or are you willing to make an argument for Go with the Flow?
No, No One Knows is their biggest song. I think it's the band in general's biggest song. It's
Yeah.
I know it's not it's kind of ruined now, but because we just pretty much go by like what's the most streamed on Spotify and YouTube and stuff. But I think that song's pretty undoubtable. It has more than double any other song, and its streams are broken up into two different versions of the song on Spotify. So it almost has like three times more than any one of other those songs. So
Yeah.
I think it's undoubtedly No One Knows.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I don't have any other notes for that song, so I guess we can move on. I think when I checked to Spotify earlier, I think it saw like had like more like 200 million more plays or 150 million more plays than the second place song. So it's a pretty solid single, and I think that song was heavily featured on like Rock Band or
Yeah.
so.
Well, it's like such a good riff, and like just the beat, the way it's like that four to the floor, like dun 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 dun. Dun. It's like easily catchy with and the video was funny. So yeah, it was a great single. It worked out really well for the band. It's pretty much what put them on like the map.
Yeah, and it's got like a bass solo, right? You don't really see that.
I
Yeah.
guess it's a bass solo, but the guitar solo is great in it. I love that guitar solo that goes into like that bass, that breakdown with the bass,
And there's some strings on there too, right? Like when it really kind of kicks off.
yeah,
Like just
yeah,
before the bass solo, I guess.
yeah. Yeah, I think you have like the cellos like dun dun dun.
Yeah, is that what it is?
Or is it just like a stand-up bass? I really don't know. If Ryan was here, he could probably tell us.
I know, yeah. If Ryan was here.
Too bad he got abducted by those aliens last night.
Poor guy.
Be here with us.
So what is your favorite song from this album?
My favorite song, This was actually a hard question because this is one of those albums that I don't really think of this album as like a song to song sort of thing. Though
Mhm.
there are songs that I do pick out and like play more than others. So I my favorite song on this is like probably changed, but for the probably past like 2 years, Songs for the Dead has been my jam. Like it's such a good song. I play it all the time. It's one of the only ones that Mark Lanigan from Screaming Trees sings,
Right.
who came onto this album to help co-write and sing on a couple of tracks. But I don't know. I love the opening riff with the drums and the slowly coming in. I like it. Just feels like a jam. Like the whole song, every like the drums feel really loose on it. And there's even on the DVD, there's like a section where Dave Grohl's recording the drums, and he first plays the beat, and it's the beat, and you don't even really notice what's wrong. You're like, that's the beat, but something's off about it. And then he stops, and Josh tells Dave, he's like, hey, play that again, but just more like relaxed. And then he just sort of plays it again. You're like, oh, there it is.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh, there it is. So it gives it that like that sort of like 70s sort of jam band, psychedelic band feel, especially with that bass line. But then it still has like that 70s rock, like Zeppelin guitar solo in the middle of it. Has the great bass work. I love the ending. The song almost feels epic because it's a little bit longer, and the second half of it is pretty much just like the band jamming out. I
Hmm.
just love it. I love the feel of it. I love like the just how it feels like it's live and like right off the floor. It just has such a great feel to it.
Yeah, yeah, I had that one as my underrated. I totally agree with everything that you said. I love the way you don't know where the song's going to go. It starts out a little like kind of like every the other songs that you've heard so far, but then all of a sudden it just veers off, and like for like the last minute of the song where it almost like it's like it hits a nitro and it's just taking off with like the drum roll, and then it breaks, and then it's like keeps going. It's like ah! And then it just keeps
Yeah.
powering through it. It's so
The
good.
only, the only reason I don't call that song underrated is because I've seen them live so many times, and when you see them live, that's not an underrated song. They play it
Right.
every. It's a song that's one of their go-to live tracks, and it's like clearly a fan favorite. The crowd goes wild, and you do get a bit of a different flavor because it's Josh Homme singing it as opposed to Mark Lanigan, so it is a little different. But
Right.
no, I love that track. It's probably one, and another one is "Go with the Flow." That's a song. If Ryan was here, we could talk. We used to cover it in our old band, along with Vince, who does our artwork and everything. And we used to cover it, and it was one of the only songs I sang for our
Oh,
old
nice.
band. It was just I just love that song too. I think that was when that was a single. I kind of knew that was going to be a single. That was like the only song I was sort of like, yeah, I can see it being a single.
Hmm.
I kind of had that like classic. I love how it uh, you have that chugging guitar riff, but then you have the lead guitar part that kind of has like that psychedelic feel along with the chugging guitar. It sounds really cool. And even just the way the song kicks in with the little, you hear the radio quickly change and then it kicks in.
Right.
It just has a cool sound to it, but it's just a great rock out song.
Yeah, yeah, that was actually the one I had for my favorite. I like how it kicks in. I think the placement on the album is good because it kind of like you have Six Shooter, but then the song Hanging Tree kind of slows things down a little bit, and then all of a sudden it just kicks off and it fires off again with like with Go with the Flow.
Yeah.
And even just like the little things like I mean, yeah, the guitar riff at the beginning is great, but like just the single like piano key reminds me of like that Stooges song, like I Want to Be Your Dog, where it's just
Yeah.
like throughout. So
Well,
it's great.
on their what's that? Let me look up the song name because on their uh debut album, they have a song that pretty much just sounds like a "I Want to Be Your Dog" cover. The
Oh
song,
yeah.
the song "If Only," the way it starts and everything. I'm like, oh,
Okay, yeah, yeah. I think that was a single, right?
your dog. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, who knows? Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
no, I agree. That was the track that pushed me to buying this album, and then seeing the video. Whenever I start hearing the song, I just think of the visuals from the album, and I just remember like everything about that is just feels like a rock star just doing his job, like doing what he does, like Josh Homme being a rock star, oozing all that energy. It's I don't even know if that's the right word for the video, but like um, it's just a great rock star song.
yeah, the video was very sexy with like the girl dancing and stuff, and the
Yeah, they're like
sperm
speeding
and all
through
that.
the
But and going back to what you were saying, like leading into this song, because since this song is sort of like you're driving from California to the Joshua Tree or whatever was the concept behind it. Because like
Mhm.
the album is exactly an hour long, so I guess it's exactly that drive. And when you get to that part of the album, it's almost like you get into the desert. And when you get to those songs like "Go with the Flow," "Gonna Leave You," "Do It Again," those three are probably the most like stereotypical Queens of the Stone Age like desert rock songs.
Right.
Like even like for my note for "Gonna Leave You," I wrote the most Queens song on the album, which whatever that means. And then like "Do It Again" is like another good opening, great riff, still with that whole desert rock thing going, and it kind of does carry in that whole road trip aspect where now you're in the desert, so now the radio stations have changed. God is now in the radio.
Right. Yeah. So do you find that the album kind of like loosens up a little bit as it goes on? Like the first like 5 or 6 tracks are like just hard hitting, aggressive sounding, or like the riffs at least are fairly aggressive. Um, but like as it goes on, I mean there are harder songs as it goes on, but it kind of loosens up just a little bit. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe it's just the mosquito song at the end that kind of like is
Well,
skewing my whole thought
I kind
process.
of I kind of had that note too, because like when you go after those like the songs where you get into the desert, and then you get the God is on the radio, which it's like a great march chugging, but you have like the pauses and like the long end, the solo at the ending and stuff. So it is a lot looser. And then you get to another love song, which is kind of a different feel for the album. This is the only song that really sounds like that. It almost has like a Vegas feel, like it's a
Right.
Vegas blend, and it's like another love song. And then you're at that point, you're at the end of the album, and it does. It's almost like you're coming to it's kind of like what you said. It's almost like you're getting. It's like it's slowing down the pace, but it's not. I don't know. The vibe sort of changes. It feels like you're coming to the end. If that
Right. Yeah.
yeah
Yeah, I think that's the best way of describing it because I always thought of it like I listened to it a bunch of times this week. But then listening to it with kind of thinking that like, oh yeah, it slows down kind of as it goes on. Like after you get through, like go with the flow, it kind of slows down. But then that's not really true because like gonna leave you and do it again, like
yeah, and
are just as hard as the other ones.
well, even another love song, like the pace of that song is like a lot faster than a lot of their other songs.
Right. Yeah, it's really catchy. And like, the weird thing about that song is it's not really a love song, it's more of a breakup song.
Yeah.
So, but it's so catchy, so you're just like you're bouncing along to it. So I just want to, yeah, just to go back to a couple things you mentioned earlier. So I did look it up. Apparently, the drive from Los Angeles to Joshua Tree is 131 miles. So that's 210 kilometers. It would take about 3 hours to do
Oh
that
no, he lied. He lied.
drive. So you'd have to listen to the album 3 times, I guess, to get through it. Traffic permitting, because I know like
Or
California
I guess at that time you could have just listened to the first three albums.
Boom. Yeah, you finished with Songs for the Deaf. And then another interesting fact about Dave Grohl's drumming, just to add on to what you mentioned about what you saw in that documentary or that making of video. Apparently, like I always thought the drumming was kind of unique or how it sounds. Like it's very distinct. Like when you hear, if you've heard the song before and you just isolate the drum track, I'm pretty sure you would hear like know what album it's from. So basically, what they did to achieve that effect was they recorded the drumming in a dead sounding isolated booth to create tight focused, punchy, and kind of claustrophobic sound. So basically, what they had to do was they had to record, or Dave Grohl had to do all his drum parts without the cymbals, and then he had to re-record it all again with only like the cymbals. So like they would mute like the drums or put like electric cymbals on it so they wouldn't make a sound, things like that. So you basically had to do like 2 tracks, 2 recordings of each track, and then they would blend it all together to create that sound. So I thought that was really interesting.
That's messed up.
But yeah, one thing I want to ask, kind of general question. I asked it in the Nirvana episode. Is Dave Grohl's contribution to this album like noticeable compared to like the other albums? Do you find?
Well, there are definitely like songs on this that have like some cool flares in the drumming. I'm sure if Ryan was here, he could probably point it out a lot better than I
For sure.
could. I'm trying to see. I did make some notes about the drumming. I can't really find what songs necessarily, but there are on like some tracks. There's like some really cool like drum flares, or even just the opening of "Song for the Dead." The way the drums are sort of like slowly coming in, and then
Hmm.
even just some of the drum work on that song, I just love. Um, but the thing is, they've worked with a lot of good drummers. Like, not to take anything away from Dave Grohl, but some of their later albums have great percussion on it as well. So he does definitely does bring a different flavor. He says this was his favorite album to drum on. Like in interviews, he said that before. So I don't know. I think it has a real cool feel. I like the whole. For me, it's more just like the loose jam band feel to it. I find works really well with Queens of the Stone Age's sound.
Mm-hmm.
But on other albums, there's been other approaches that have also worked. So it's part of what makes one Queen's album to another unique, but the same because they've worked with many different drummers. So it's never been they've never really had a constant. I think they had the one, I can't think of his name now, but he played on 2 or 3. But yeah, it seems like it's always a rotating lineup.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, just to go back to so that song for the Dead again. It was like when you hear like that final drum roll at the end, like especially in headphones, like the way it's recorded, it just sounds like the drums are like everywhere and like but focus at the same time. So it's like that final drum roll. It just seems like it's never going to stop. And it's just like with the guitars, it's like it's awesome, especially on headphones.
Or like the song Hanging Tree. I like the drum in that is really cool too. It does like that little like hi-hat flare and like almost like pauses and then goes back to
right.
It's almost like a broken beat. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. Like even just the pausing and like they have like the weird pauses in songs. That like it doesn't seem like it's a hard thing, but a lot of the timing of those are kind of like offbeat. I'm trying to fuck. But yeah, no, the drumming does stand out. I remember at the time it was like the craziest thing, like like Dave Grohl is back behind the kit and everything, so it was really cool. But I don't know, their other albums have had great drumming too. I think it's more of like a hype thing, like not to take anything away from his drumming, but no, it is distinct on this album. It does stand out a little bit, but the album overall is just. It seems like everything sort of came together on this.
Yeah, yeah. I guess a random question: do you think this album got a bigger push because Dave Grohl was on it?
100%.
Yeah.
Like 100%. Yeah.
So like the video for No One Knows wouldn't be played as often as it was if Dave Grohl wasn't on it. If it was
well, just reading into it, they went like I was saying at the beginning, how they went from a band that I was just sort of discovering and thought was like cool little underground band I was discovering, and then you get the news of Dave Grohl being the drummer on the next album. You're like, oh wow, that's cool. And then the next thing you know, they're one of the biggest rock bands since then. Like they're just constantly on the radio to the point where you get sick of their songs. You know what I mean? Like I didn't really see that trajectory, and Dave Grohl being part of this album. Not to say that Queens of Stone Age never would have reached this success, but it definitely propelled it with him being part of this album and Dave Grohl being who he is. And, you know, it's the drummer from Nirvana playing drums for the first time on an album since In Utero.
Right, yeah, or since Tom Petty.
Since Tom Petty.
Yeah. No, a lot of the interviews that I kind of watched or read this week about him, he was pretty much saying he was kind of in a lull with what was going on with the Foo Fighters recording at the time. And then he just wanted to kind of recharge. So he's known Josh Homme for years, I guess. During their Rated R tour, they opened for Foo Fighters at certain points, so they've known each other for a very long time. So he's like, "Hey, buddy, you want to come and do drums on this album?" And he's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And he put Foo Fighters on hiatus. I don't know if we mentioned that at the top or not.
Like I guess he wanted to play on, or they wanted him to play on Rated R originally, but it didn't work out.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess this was sort of built up, but I don't know. I know a lot of fans and stuff online it comes up when you're on Reddit, like in the music thread, whenever Queens of the Stone Age comes up or this album comes up, or them Crooked Vultures come up, people always want a songs for the deaf too. They want more songs for the deaf.
Yeah.
And I can see them doing it again. Like if they can get these guys back together, like even just, you know, Josh, Nick, Mark, and Dave, like even just getting that core 4 back together for an album would be interesting to hear what they would give us now, and kind of do the same concept, but maybe have it, you're driving from New York to wherever, you know, like, and maybe sort of touch on like, I don't know, post-punk or something.
You're on a plane from New York to to the desert, and it's produced by Nine Inch Nails, or sorry, Trent Reznor, I guess.
But I don't know, like listening to like their last album and like their work with Royal Blood, I got a feeling the next album's gonna be really punchy. I don't know.
Okay.
I have a feeling. I don't know. I could be wrong. Not a lot of their stuff is really punchy, so it's kind of a safe thing to say. But
Yeah, I think for some reason I think like Clockwork they all work together again. Maybe it was just on some songs. I for some reason that album sticks out as like I remember it in my mind as being like maybe it's just Dave Grohl was on it. Anyway, let me look. I think he's yeah. It looks like they all got back together for that album. So I don't know how many songs they worked on together because I didn't look too closely at that album.
yeah, I completely forgot about that. I think I knew that. Now that you're saying that, it's like so familiar. Yeah, Dave Grohl played drums on 6 songs.
Okay, yeah, I think there's only like 10 tracks on that album.
Yeah, he played on "If I Had a Tail," "My God Is the Sun," and then he played on "Fair Weather Friends," "Smooth Sailing," and "I Appear Missing."
Nice. So I
Actually,
guess
I completely forgot he came back for that album.
yeah, I remember hearing something about it. That's why I bought it. It's like one of the I thought that album came out later, so I thought it was one of the last albums I remember buying, and I bought it for that reason because I really like "My God Is the Sun," and then it's like, oh, Dave Grohl's back on. Maybe this is like the sequel album, so I bought it like pretty much a blind buy.
That was a great album. And I have to say, like, of all the times I saw them live, that was probably one of the best. Like, that a really cool stage show and video and everything for like Clockwork.
Mm-hmm.
Great live show.
So I guess to wrap up the song questions, is there a song that you skip on this album? I'll answer kind of real quick. I do know of people that skip Six Shooter. It's the shortest song, but it is probably the craziest, most aggressive song. So I can understand why. I mean, usually when I listen to this album, it's on from beginning to end. That's how I listen to it. But I can understand the argument for wanting to skip that track.
Yeah, I don't skip any track. I kind of get it, but it's like a short track, and I'm a fan of like that whole bombastic sort of punch, and it comes in a good part of the album too.
Yeah,
So
and I heard or I read that on like for the Walmart release, the edited version of that album, rather than just kind of muting the swear words or the words that they objected with, they put in like beeps, so it was like almost like hard to listen to, and so it's like every time they sort of like beep.
well, even before is it? I think it's before that song where he's like they're searching on the radio for a long time before they get to that, isn't it? And then it's Six Shooter, and it's really short.
Right. Yeah, I think yeah, the sky is falling, and then it's 6 minutes long or 6:15. So I think the last part of that's probably what they're like
Yeah.
seeking the radio. Oh yeah, one other random question for you. Did you like know about the Zero track, the real song for the deaf? Have you ever heard that before?
I remember hearing about it. I had probably had the album for maybe a month or something, and someone sang it, and just I had this like little boombox, and I think it was already in there, so I just hit play and hit rewind back and heard it, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool," and then probably never did it again. Maybe showed a couple of friends,
Right.
but I kind of almost completely forgot about it up until the streaming area, and then when you go on like Spotify, and it's like a separate track onto its own, and it's like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about this." It's kind of cool, but again, I still don't listen to it because I like the way the album opens. It's so iconic to me, like getting into the car, turning it on, turning the radio on.
Yeah.
It just works so well that having that little intro, I don't know, it seems sort of pointless to me, but this is the album though. This album has like all the Easter eggs. It has a negative track, it has a bonus track at the end if you keep listening, but then there's like two sort of bonus tracks, and then you have the radio stuff in between where there's like different guest appearances and stuff. So it seems like this album is just like chock full of like Easter eggs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think it was maybe I've heard it before. I remember hearing it before, but I remember it really stuck out this week because it's like track one on Spotify for this album. And it sounds cool, but I totally agree with what you're saying that like the car door closing, starting up the engine, that's really where the album should start.
Yeah.
I agree with that. So I guess this can take us on to the artwork. So I did find my old CD.
Nice.
Up. So I did. Apparently, I always thought this was Josh Homme on the CD, but apparently it's not. Let me see.
I thought it was Johnny Bravo.
Nice. It kind of looks like him.
My CD had like another thing, so like the inside would open up again, and there was like a DVD.
Oh, okay, yeah, I never had the bonus disc. This is just like the single one.
Yeah, the DVD was kind of cool. Like for a while, bands were doing it, and on the DVD it was like a bunch of like a live performances with Dave Grohl, and
Right.
then a bunch of studio stuff where it showed them like recording or being interviewed about the album. It was kind of cool. Like it was like sort of like a behind the curtain sort of thing. I remember a bunch of bands did it. Mogwai had a similar thing, and yeah, a few bands of that era were releasing bonus DVDs along with their CDs.
Yeah. So the guy on the cover here is Dave Ketching. He did some work on the album. I can't find exactly what instruments he played, but yeah, he worked on the album, and then on it's got the panel on the inside. So
Yeah.
apparently that car is I have it noted here. It is a Fiat 124 Sports Spider. Apparently, it was a big car between the 60s and the 80s. And the other thing that's weird is I remember buying this album. It had like the parental advisory thing, and I'm like, like, what am I buying? A Limp Bizkit album? It's so big, it's on there, but there's only like 2 songs where there's swearing, and
Yeah.
like Six Shooter kind of has like pretty objectionable lyrics in it. So, but yeah, it's not that bad of an album, like in terms of like coarse language or profanity or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, oh,
Never thought about it.
enough for the artwork. um, okay, so this can move us on to kind of our more broader questions. How often is this album in your rotation?
Fairly often. Like I revisit Queens of the Stone Age a lot. Like I keep up with releases. I revisit albums sort of whenever I'm in the mood for like a rock out sort of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely like a lot of times I always say I jump to playlists, like, oh, I have a bunch of songs on a playlist. I have a bunch of songs on a playlist. Queens of the Stone Age, yeah, I have songs on playlists, but they're more of an albums. Like I will throw on, I'll throw on Songs for the Deaf or Like Clockwork or Lullabies, depending on what mood I'm in. Because like we are saying, like they have definitely have a sound, but each album is a little different. Like Era Vulgaris is more spastic and high energy, and Lullabies it seems a lot darker and brooding. Like you get different vibes with different albums. So
Mm-hmm.
and definitely uh uh Songs for the Deaf is like kind of hits all the boxes for Queens of the Stone Age. So it's definitely the one I revisit the most by them. So yeah, this is one that's regularly played. How about
Yeah,
for
I agree. For me, it's in there. I mean, I can't remember the last time I listened to it because I didn't remember like the Spotify, like the first track. So I don't know if I've listened to it on Spotify. So that was kind of getting me to think. But in its CD form, I used to listen to this album. Like I probably listened to it at least once a year. And back when I was driving a lot more, this album was constantly on. Like especially during college, I went to school in Niagara Falls, and the drive home was probably about an hour and a half, 90-minute drive. But when I would get out, like to go out, it was in Welland, Ontario. So to leave Welland, you have to get on the 406 to hit the QEW. So when you're merging onto those highways, so you can queue up this album, and if you're doing like 120, 130, you make it home in an hour. And this album was just like the perfect album. It helped my drive time commute.
definitely?
So yeah, no, and the other thing that's weird about, well, not even weird, it's great, is I can listen to this album like anytime. Like I don't have to be any mood. If I usually I like to listen to it more when I'm like getting ready for something. Say if I'm by myself and I'm like it's like a pre-drink or you want to get pumped or you need some energy, I'll throw this on and I'm sitting through it for like the hour. I love it so much.
This definitely is like a mood setter, and like how the album opens is part of that because you have like the whole car stuff, but then when the first song comes in, it's sort of muted, and then it sort of hits, so it wakes you up. But then after that, you don't really get that much energy again until Six Shooter, which is almost like they kind of jolt you with that energy again halfway through to kind of bring it back. But
Mm-hmm.
then like this album goes to No One Knows, which is great. And then just the way the album flows through, yeah, it's great to get you pumped up and it helps create a mood. So even if you're not in the mood to listen to something heavy or loud, it will make you want to listen to something heavy or loud by the time you get through Millionaire.
Right. Yeah. No, I completely agree. The other thing is that I wanted to point out about this album specifically is I don't think there's like a tighter like sequence of 5 songs like to kick off an album. I know I was thinking like the closest version that I could think of is like the final 5 songs on like White Pony. Like once you hit that first track and you're pretty much locked the rest of the way. With this one, it just kicks off and like right up until like track 5 or like just before Six Shooter, you're not skipping any of those songs. You're not doing anything there. It's such a tight 5-song sequence.
But I could also see like if you're not open to the craziness that Nick brings, especially with the songs he sings,
Mm-hmm.
I could see someone skipping Millionaire and Six Shooter.
Yeah.
But other than that, like because I can see how those are off-putting to certain crowds. Because even for like just a general rock fan, this album is pretty accessible, except for those two songs, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see even if you love this band or this album, I can see those songs being skipped. I don't skip them per se because I find that they do inject that energy, and I love that energy on the album.
Yeah, yeah. My wife probably wouldn't like finish the first track unless I made her, but I didn't make her.
And then when you think it's done, it kicks right back in.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the other thing too is like this album. I mean, I don't. It's like an hour long, but like I still think of it as like lean. Like there's no wasted time on it. Um, like it's always constant energy. You don't have to worry. There's no ballads other than maybe the last track is a little bit slower. But it's like there's no real quiet moments. It's just pounding the whole time, and it's like it's got like a muscle to it. So it's hard to jump around or do anything. You just got to take the whole thing.
It's like what you said, like the way the songs, like the first four songs flow together. Like by the time you even like look to see where you're at on the album, you're already halfway through.
Yeah.
Like when you're kind of at Six Shooter and you're like, oh, this song's crazy. Like, is this like where are we? You're like, oh shit. Like I'm already 6 songs deep. Like I'm halfway there.
Yeah, and like when you think you want to tap out or take a break, then you got to go with the flow, and then you're on like the second half. So it's great.
Yeah, because like that second half definitely just sort of settles in, and like you go through like the desert, and then it, like we are talking earlier, like it's kind of slows you down into like the last tracks, and like that song for the Deaf does have like sort of like it has like an epic feel, even though it's under 7 minutes, but it has like that big opening, it has the big solo, it's a great closer.
Mm-hmm.
And it has like all the it's almost like it has all the pieces of being an epic track, but it still doesn't it's still not 10 and a half minutes where you're sort of like, oh man, is he gonna solo for like another 5 minutes here?
Right.
But then it takes you to like the secret track. So like even when the album's done, you get that little different version of Feel Good Hit of the Summer, and then it kind of drones off, and then you get the Mosquito song, which I had listed as my most underrated because
Okay.
it's a secret song, and probably a lot of people are going to skip it. But it's also like a different flavor of Queens of the Stone Age you don't normally get. Like it's kind of really cool. Like I love the feel of that track.
Yeah. So I don't know. I didn't really come across anything on this, but it says it's a hidden track on here. So I mean, it's saying it's a hidden track, so it's not really hidden. But is it like supposed to be included in the album, or should you take this album like it should? Song for the Deaf is technically the last song on this track on this album.
I always include secret tracks as part of it.
Okay.
Well, I guess depending on the album. For this, it kind of feels like it. It almost feels like it's coming out for an encore.
Yeah.
It has that encore feel where it's like just the guitar and his voice, and then you got like the strings or whatever that kind of play over it as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a nice brooding, haunting vibe to leave you with, and it's almost like a precursor to the next album, where it is a lot more brooding. It's a lot, like Burn the Witch and all that stuff. It's a lot more Halloween.
Right.
It's like It's funny because Lullabies of Paralyzed, as weird as it sounds, that's an album I'll throw on around like Halloween time. It's a very fall album because I think it's more brooding. I think that's part of the reason why.
Yeah, let me check when that album came out because I get the same vibe. Oh, it came out March 22 of 2005.
This out like Songs for the Deaf came out end of August.
Yeah, yeah, that could be a fall album for sure. Even though I it's like an any time of the year album for me.
Came out the day after my 21st birthday.
Nice.
Or 22nd birthday, I guess.
Yeah, no, I like the way you stated like the Mosquito song. I see that. I never thought of it like that as an encore, but I agree. Like that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
So where do you rank this album in the band's discography? Or how do you rank the band's discography?
I kind of had trouble with this because they're definitely a band where when every album came out, it was just great. Like I never really thought of there was never really like a fall off. I thought it took me a while to get into the last album. Actually, it took me a while to get into Lullabies at first too, but then I learned to really love that album, especially after I saw it live. And Villains, I wasn't the biggest fan of upon first listen. I just felt the band lost some energy on it. So I
Weird,
didn't really,
wait, weird random question. When you heard Mark Ronson was producing, did that like change your the way you thought or felt about it?
I didn't know what to think because generally speaking, I guess I like Mark Ronson. I love like the his soul, like his out. From what I've heard from him, I like the stuff he did with Bruno Mars, like the his version of Valerie with Amy Winehouse. I listen to all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? He has a song. Was it Mystical? The song of Mystical. That's a great track. Like he has a lot of good songs. Is that him? Whatever.
I think so.
Yeah, I like Mark Ronson, so I was kind of like interested. I was very interested to hear because I'm like, okay, it's one of my favorite like bands, and they're working with a pop producer I enjoy for the most part. So I was kind of interested to hear, and like when I heard the first single, like this is kind of cool, but it seems sort of it's not as like chugging and heavy as what I'm used to with Queens. Like it doesn't have that same sort of feel. And then when I heard the album, it seems sort of it wasn't as punchy to me. Like it didn't feel like it had that same sort of power that I normally associate with their music. But like I was saying, like now hearing how he produced that new Royal Blood album, it kind of makes me interested to hear because it seems like this next album will maybe see how maybe he incorporates it. Maybe he'll produce the next one on his own.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It kind of I'm more interested now and like listening to it this week. I'm like I should have gave it more of a shot. I didn't give it as many listens as I did previously with older albums. So in saying that, the way I had it ranked is number one. I have Songs for the Deaf.
Yeah.
This is the album that I most associate with Queens of the Stone Age. It's an album that I've recommended to many people, like even a lot of older friends I have at work who are not really into newer rock bands. I remember I was, I know it's like a 20-year-old album now, but I always recommend it. It seems like a album that any rock fan would like, to me at least. Then number two, I have Era Vulgaris. I was a big fan of that album, like 666, Misfit Love. Like I just love like those spastic riffs and everything.
Yeah.
And then I have Like Clockwork. That was an album that I remember when it first came out, it was like a big deal. I just loved everything about it. The live show was amazing. Then I had Rated R because it was sort of like my first love. I even feel like I'm putting it low at number four. Then I have their self-titled, which I think is a great album. Then I have Lullabies, only because it took me a while to get into, and there are some songs I really like on that album. I don't listen to it as much as other ones. It's more like I was saying, like maybe around like fall time, I might throw it on a couple times, but generally I don't listen to it as much as the other ones. And then I had Villains at the bottom, just because it's the newest. I don't think I gave it a fair shot when it came out, and I find it nowadays too. It's harder to listen to music the same way I used to. Like it's not. It feels different. Like you're not buying CDs anymore, so you don't have that attachment anymore. Like actually owning it, putting it in your car and whatever. It's just sort of like on your phone along with everything else. So actually, the way spot this is kind of unrelated, but it will probably change the way I listen to music going forward. Spotify recently updated. Did your Spotify update?
In what way?
Do you hear that? There's a motorcycle. I apologize if you can hear a motorcycle.
It's okay. Yeah, I heard a little bit.
But,
Get a
that's
sandwich.
my neighbor. But so Spotify recently they changed everything so you can like sort stuff by recently played, which is like a game changer. Because what would happen for me is I would try to stay up to date with like releases of albums, but then after a while that album slowly just drops. So even if you're listening to it every day, it's not really at the top of your list. Whereas now I'm listening to albums more because now like I'm listening to the new Royal Blood right now, so it's always sort of at the top. I'm listening to the new, like I've been listening to a lot of Idols lately. That's always around the top. So I think the way it's funny, like how just these apps control our listening habits so much that I think that them updating the way they sort their music is going to change my listening habits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is crazy to think, but yeah. So again, my rank is Songs for the Deaf, Era Vulgaris, Like Clockwork, Rated R, Queens of the Stone Age, Lullabies of and then Villains. What's yours?
So yeah, mine obviously Songs for the Deaf. I won't Rated R the second one because I think it was my second love. I listened to it a lot in college, and I mean, yeah, Lost Art, Keeping a Secret, and Feel Good Hit of the Summer are just great, two bangers. So I threw that in second. I like Clockwork a lot, so that was my number three. Era Vulgaris I had as number four. Lullabies to Paralyze I had as number five. So the thing is with those two albums, they really blur together because those are like college years, the singles, all those they kind of have a similar feel at times. Even though they are different, I would say Era Vulgaris is a lot more relaxed than Lullabies. And then I had for six, oh sorry, go ahead.
I always thought Era Vulgaris was a lot more like spastic, like six, six, sick, and like sixes and sevens and stuff. Like the way the riffs are.
Maybe it's just like Make It With You is like the one that kind of like stands out. Maybe that one's just like a standout track. Like I only did like a once through this week.
I have this might be a hot take for Make It With You, but I don't like that song as a standalone, but I think it works really well on the album. I think part of that might have been just that I got sick of the amount of radio play it got. But
Right.
I remember hearing it on the album and like enjoying it, but then just when I heard it like isolated, I was like, eh.
Because I think the whole thing with that song wasn't it part of like a desert session, and then they
Yeah.
just kind of made it a
Yeah.
Queens of the Stone Age song. So that's
Yeah.
probably why it doesn't really like fit 100%. But yeah, you're right. That song is played quite a bit, especially on college radio. I hear that song like it seems like all the time.
Yeah.
And then number six, I had the self-titled, and then number seven, I had Villains. Mostly, yeah, because I heard it for the first time this week. I think based off of the single, the lead single was "The Way You Used to Do." I remember hearing that, and I'm like, are they trying like this is a Queens of the Stone Age like pop song? Like this is them trying to go pop as best they can. So I was based off of the strength of that single. It was kind of lukewarm to me. So that's why I took my time getting the Villains. Although I did like the track or the album, I thought it was pretty good, and I regret that I took as long as I did to listen to it.
Yeah, I was sort of on the same boat with you when that song first came out. Like just like the
Yeah, yeah.
like it's not a bad riff. It's not it's not even like bad production. It just I think it kind of caught me off guard because like I've been kind of saying this whole time, like Queens of Stone Age was one of the only like rocky rock bands still around that were making these like really thick guitar sounding rock music. And then when they kind of came with, the more buzzy sort of kind of more light sound, I guess, not as like heavy distorted sound, I was sort of like, oh. But it is a good album. Like it's probably just I'm not gonna go to it as much because for me, Queens of the Stone Age is Mexicola and Queens of the Stone Age is, Monster and your Parasol. They're like that kind of more hard
I
hitting
think,
stuff.
yeah, I see what you're saying. I think it could be one of those things where it depends on how you came into the band. So if you came in on like one of their first three albums, then you might not think so much of that one. But if you came in on like maybe Little Sister or something after, you might have a different perspective on that. But
Yeah, it's not that I don't like it. It's just I don't feel the same connection with it that I do with older other stuff.
yeah, no, yeah. Like for example, like I have like Clockwork ranked number three. Like My God Is the Sun. When I heard that, I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
they're back. Like this is good stuff.
But like for me, that doesn't sort of diminish any sort of excitement I have around the band or my feeling towards the band because it still is a solid album and I still enjoyed it and I still will probably listen to it going forward. And I'm still excited for what comes next. But it's just like I was saying, I just don't have like that same attachment. I don't think I'm ever gonna. I could be wrong. This could change in a few years, but as of right now, I don't have that like love for any specific song on the album where I'm gonna just put it on and blast it randomly when I need energy on a Friday night or something.
Yeah, for sure. Um, this can move us on to. Do you think this is the band's peak?
Uh, it's kind of a weird question because yes, it was their peak. I would say it's more. This was their breakout.
Okay.
This
Yeah.
was this was their break. I'm not actually. I know this is kind of a new category we created, like the peak thing, but
Yeah.
it might actually be smarter to do like a breakout or peak. Kind of break it up in that way. Or
I think the problem with this question is like we don't really we all have different interpretations of the peak, or it can change
Which is
album.
fine. Which is fine, but it's weird. It's weird for like a rock band like this because uh not like this, but any rock band, like even when we're talking about Foo Fighters, because that album is sort of the same thing where like it's their peak in the sense that this is what sort of broke them through and made them the famous band that they are today.
Mm-hmm.
But they're selling out stadiums now.
Right.
Whereas, like when I saw them before Era Vulgaris came out, and we went to the Hamilton show, it was they cut Cops Coliseum in half, so they didn't sell out the whole arena. So you kind of had the arena, but it was still a small show.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I saw them like later on, like it's ACC, you know what I mean? Like it's the like when I saw them on Like Clockwork, they're playing the full ACC, so they're obviously a bigger band than a bigger touring band than they were 10 years ago. But this album is their breakout and probably what most fans would probably consider their best.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I put yes, it's their peak, but I'm like, Josh Homme's like everywhere. He's producing everything. Like, if anything, the people that they're working with after this album, the talent pool has only grown so much bigger for them, and they've just gained more like respect. Like Elton John, I know, did some tracks on one of the albums and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, they broke out, but at the same time, they haven't gotten smaller, and they're all their albums. Like when we rank their albums, it's like disappointing to rank their albums because like they're going from like a 10 to like a 7. Like that's where the albums are, right? So it's like you're ranking like all favorites. So it's they've been consistently good.
Like it's true what you're saying, because even like the next album after this, they had Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top on it, and I remember him saying at the time, like, "This is a dream. Like I could never imagine that this would happen," and it purely happened because of the success of this album. You know, like if this album never came out, they probably wouldn't have had him on Lullabies, and it's cool that he's able to do that, especially an artist who loves to collaborate. Now he's able to collaborate with almost whoever he wants with.
Yeah, no, I think it's just opened the door to the possibilities, and for an artist like him, he's almost like the Dave Grohl of the desert. Like he can work with anyone. Everyone seems to be really happy to work with him. I know he's got like I think I saw like a line somewhere where there was a festival that Jay-Z puts together, and they wanted Jay-Z like specifically like asked, well, not specifically, but had his security like pat down all the people coming in, and it was like, hey, if you go through my bag right now, this show's not happening. So he's like all about doing drugs. So it's like you can see like the bands kind of come through there. But then yeah, you have the guys like Elton John who are like, as far as I know, maybe aren't into like doing drugs as much, but like
he's clean now.
Is he? Yeah. Okay. So there you go. So he's got such a wide range of like the people that he works with, that he's connected to.
Well, I meant Elton John, not Josh. Elton John.
Oh yeah, definitely not Josh Homme.
Elton John is clean.
Yeah, Elton John is clean, but Josh Homme's probably high on mushrooms somewhere right now. I don't even know.
Well, he was just on that like recently Paul McCartney released that cover album of I guess he had an album come out last year and he got a bunch of artists to cover songs from it. Mm-hmm. I haven't heard it yet, but I guess Josh Homme did a song.
Nice.
Like he's part of those kind of things now, or like even just on Them Crooked Vultures having like John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin. Like he's working with a member of Led Zeppelin. He's working with a member of ZZ Top. He's working with a member of Nirvana. Like he's working with all these like legends, like rock legends, like just left and right. Like he's living out his dream, and it's all probably because of the success of this album is why it's all happening.
Yeah, I would say it was certainly changed their trajectory for sure.
Yeah.
So one other random question I want to ask you. What, for people who maybe haven't heard of Queens of the Stone Age before, what would you recommend them? I mean, maybe not necessarily like the Desert Sessions, but what other bands do you think are good gateways to like Queens of the Stone Age? Any that come like to mind off the top of your head?
Well, like there's like the other desert rock stuff, I guess, like Monster Magnet, Fu Manchu, Kyuss, obviously. But I was never really into those bands until sort of after I got into Queens of the Stone Age.
Right. Yeah. Me
but
too.
There are definitely bands you can check out, like Eagles of Death Metal and stuff. Where even like the Dead Weather, like it has Dan Fertitta, who who works with Queens of the Stone Age a lot. He or what's the other band? Like there's so many. Like just go to the Wikipedia, look at the associated acts for Queens of the Stone Age. Like they're all going to be good acts. Like there's so many good bands. Let me just click there to. There's one that I can't think of right now. It's freaking slipping my mind and it's bothering me.
Yeah, because I remember
Mini Mansions. Mini Mansions is a great band. It's
I haven't heard
the
of
guy,
it.
the one, I can't think of his name now. It's two guys that play with Queens of Stone Age bass player Michael Schumann is in Mini Mansions. He like sings for them and stuff.
Right.
So yeah, there's like so many bands that they've worked with. Like Mark Lanigan, who sings a bunch of songs on this album and helped co-write some of the lyrics. He obviously from the Screaming Trees, which was like a '90s rock band. You could check them out, or even Josh Homme. They worked with Iggy Pop on that album a few years ago, which was actually really good. So you can check that out as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw that.
yeah. It was actually like I was actually surprised. Iggy, the sidebar, but Iggy Pop. I remember he kind of came back and released an album with the Stooges. If I'm gonna probably like 10 years ago now, and I was sort of like, oh, I can't believe they're doing this. It was called The Weirdness, and I was sort of like mixed on it. But then they released another album in 2013 called Ready to Die, and it was great. And then a few years after that, he released the album with that post pop depression with Josh Homme. That was great too. So yeah, check out Iggy Pop, or even just the Stooges. They're very similar to, like, you can hear a lot of like Queens of the Stone Age and like a lot of those like the Stooges and Black Sabbath, those like 60s and 70s rock bands are very much of like the same ilk of what Queens of the Stone Age, like their whole vibe, or like uh Blue Oyster Cult or something.
Right.
Like it's very like they like Queens of the Stone Age has that sort of like 60s 70s soul to them in a way, but it's almost like a soul that was brought back to life through voodoo and witchcraft.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I'll listen. I love the Stooges because I think they only had what, like 3 albums like in the '70s or whatever, and then they kind of
60s.
broke up or whatever, stopped recording for a while.
No, but check out Ready to Die and that post pop depression. Those are good albums.
Will do. Yeah, I'll listen to those this week. Um, all right, so I guess this can kind of move us on. Do you think they have like a place in history, or what is their place in history, or is it just like Josh working with everyone, and it'll be like the culmination of everything when he calls it quits, if that ever happens, when he does?
Yeah, he's pretty much become like a Trent Reznor type figure. Like obviously Trent Reznor is a lot bigger because Nine Inch Nails peak was a lot bigger. But yeah,
He's busy winning Oscars too.
yeah, like he sort of worked with everyone. Now he started producing for other rock bands, and I feel like if my spidey senses are right, we're gonna get another moment in rock music, and I think he's gonna be a big part of that with like producing, probably releasing another album. And I think this album specific is just going to go down as a rock classic. It's pretty much at the point where it's going to get the 5-year treatment, which where I mean, like every 5 years, we're going to get the 20th, 25th, 30th, 35th anniversary sort of deal. Like it's going to next year is going to be the 20th anniversary. I'm sure we're going to get some sort of release. I'm sure we're going to get some sort of something based around it. Fingers crossed, we'll get more songs for the deaf or something.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's like I think it's like a highly touted album. Like it's an album that is constantly mentioned on albums to check out. So I think it has like a strong legacy in rock music. It might be just rock music specific, but I feel it's an album that's gonna be hard to pass over if you're a rock fan and you're sort of like discovering classic rock albums from the past 20 to 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the thing that makes Josh such a great producer is like, I mean, he's the only constant in this band. So every time it's like a revolving door of like new musicians coming in. So it's all about collaboration. That's what it's been pretty much since day one. So that I think makes him a really good producer. So I don't know, maybe the best days of, I hope not, but maybe the best days of Queens of the Stone Age might be behind them. But I think there's from a music producer standpoint, I think Josh Homme is probably going to have a lot better albums like down the road as he gets older and depending on who he works with and whatnot.
like even though he's collaborative, like watching that behind the scenes stuff, he does still seem like a guy who very much knows what he wants in the music that he's making.
Right.
So like I think he just has like a vision in his head, and he's just depending on finding the right people to match that sound he has in his head. So I think his future is kind of endless. Like I can see him doing anything. I could see him, you know, continuing along with Queens of Stone Age. I can see him continuing on working with other people. I can see maybe another making some more Eagles of Death Metal, maybe another of them Crooked Vultures. I can see him doing a soundtrack. I could see him doing a lot of things. I know he had a podcast for a while, I think, that was somewhat successful as well. And even him on Rogan was entertaining. He's an interesting guy. So
I
I
did
think
listen to it. Yeah.
yeah, so he has like a future, like obviously he's been around forever. But I think another thing will be is if we do get a rock resurgence right now, it'll be interesting because they're sort of right in the sweet spot to see how, like along with like a band like Foo Fighters, to see how their influence is actually being going to be played out. Because now it's been about 20 years since these bands originally popped.
Mm-hmm.
So now if rock music is going to have a comeback, or the rock music that's going to be coming out now is definitely going to be influenced by these types of bands. So I'm kind of interested to hear of the next generation of rock that's sort of the lineage of this stuff.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. I hope you're right. I mean, it's maybe people just that's the way it goes with all these like with trends and stuff like that. Maybe the 20s will be like the rock resurgence. We'll see some of that come back because it seems like back when I was in college, it seemed like indie rock was like it was so big. Maybe it was just that was the only scene I was paying attention to, so that's why it was so big. But it feels like we haven't had a. It's been at least a decade where we haven't had like consistent rock, like just be in the conversation. So
Yeah.
hopefully you're right and your spidey senses are accurate.
Yeah, for me, it does seem like it's just sort of bubbling. Like even just every week, like now you're looking like, oh, uh, Modest Mouse has a new song out. Oh, Coldplay has a new song out, even, or this band had an album come out, or Royal Blood are like a thing now, and 21 Pilots have a new song. Like it just sort of, it seems like it's bubbling, and like Tame Impala is becoming more important, and people seem to like Greta Van Fleet for some reason. Like there's just sort of a bunch of stuff sort of bubbling, and I don't know. I'm hoping that we get some more rock because I miss hearing guitars on a regular basis.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Just bring some noise or some anything.
Just something new. Like last year, I kind of became sort of like, okay, I need to like find some new bands, and I downloaded some new playlists, and I was able to find some new bands like Narrowhead and like Idols and stuff, and the Viagra Boys and different rock bands I kind of got into, but none of them are American. Like they're all Australian. So I'm hoping we get some more American rock bands, but I'm cool if it's from Australia or New Zealand. I'm cool with that too. So
yeah, hey, as long as it's good, I'm on board.
yeah.
So I mean, I'll ask the obvious or the question here, and I think we both know the answer. Is this album essential? Like,
honestly, going into this week, I didn't know how I was going to answer this question because I'm like, Queens of Stone Age is very much like, I feel like I'm really obsessed with this album. I talk about it a lot. I bring it up a lot. I play songs from it a lot. So I'm like, is it just me, or is it like the wider, music landscape? But no, the more reading I did this week and the more I kind of like took myself back to that era, I was almost just reminded how big this album actually is and how much it is loved and how much it is brought up, and it's constantly on lists of best rock albums and all this and that, and it seems very important. So yeah, I think I know I feel like this is sort of becoming like every week everything is essential, but I think it's just part of the albums that we're talking about are obviously albums that we really like and that we feel are important. So I do think this album is essential, maybe for just rock, like it's a rock essential. Like if you're a hip hop fan or a pop fan or a dance music fan, I won't be like, check out Queens of the Stone Age. But Queens of the Stone Age was even a band that when I got into them, I played for my dad because I'm like, yo, dad, check out this band. You'd probably like them. And I remember playing him like Lost Art and playing him like No One Knows and stuff, and he enjoyed it. Or even now, if I put on Queens of the Stone Age, he'd probably be like, turn it up. So it's a band that anyone who enjoys rock music would enjoy.
yeah.
So I think it's essential.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even think to put. I just took it like pure, like personally, like how I felt about it, because I feel like for me in the 2000s and like even up until now, this album's like amazing. I love this album so much. I think it's very solid. There's not a wasted track on it. And I think everybody should agree with me. I want everybody to hear this, and so that way they listen to it. But like then again, I just looked and it didn't even go platinum. So it's like, how big is this album? How is it too hard for people? Like I don't even know. But I love this album. It's probably it's definitely my top 10 for best albums of the 2000s. Maybe even the top 5 for purely on how much I've listened to it over the years.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's essential without a doubt.
Yeah, it's one of those albums too. Like it's approaching 20 years old next year, and it doesn't even feel that old, but it makes sense because Queens of Stone Age have been around for so long now. It just still feels fresh after all these years. I don't know. Maybe it's just the old man in me and just my nostalgia or whatever. But this band is definitely not nostalgia driven. My enjoyment, like last week when we were talking about Foo Fighters, or in the past when we've talked about like Weezer and stuff, it does feel like a lot more nostalgia is playing a role in my enjoyment of it. Whereas with this album and just Queens of Stone Age in general, it just feels like they're just a solid rock band. Doesn't matter what era they came out in. They could have been out in the 70s. They could have been out like uh, in the 90s. They could come out now, and I still feel like they would find an audience. Like their music is just that good that doesn't matter when it's released, they would find an audience. They're just a solid band.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the one thing that's rare for an album like this. Like my regard for this album is like the first time I heard it, I thought it was amazing, and I still listen to it. Like I listened to it like almost 2 times today, like back to back, and I still feel the same way. And it's hard for albums like usually eventually like maybe that'll start to deteriorate like that feeling after a while, or you've heard it so much on the radio. But like in a weird way, I've almost like I like No One Knows even more now than I did when I first heard it. So yeah, I just love this album, and I have nothing but good things to say about it.
Yeah, and even just listening to it like on the loud stereo, because for nowadays music seems to be, for me at least, like a lot of these rock albums, because like when you're at like a barbecue or party, it's more of just sort of a more middle of the road playlist or more sort of dance oriented songs or whatever. So for me, listening to like an album like this has become like a very solitary thing, like in the car or on headphones at the gym or when I'm out for a walk or something. But this week, like playing it on like the loudspeaker, like the loudspeakers with like the subwoofer and the bass and everything, it just sounds so good. Like it just sounds so good. Like I feel like I'm not giving music the proper uh like sound system to listen to. Even though I have like an amazing sound system in my basement, I feel like I'm not utilizing it for music, because like a lot of these albums just sound so great. Like the production sounds so great, and this album especially, like nowadays seems like things are mixed for iPods, where back then stuff was still mixed for stereos.
Yeah. Do you have this album on vinyl?
No, no, but I might have to order it.
Yeah. Let me know if you get it on vinyl. Whoever gets it first, we'll just like smoke a J and listen to it at your place.
Like whenever I email, like sort of go off topic, but like I'll email those guys on like Marketplace, ask for like their lists of records.
Mm-hmm.
They'll like never get back to you, or they'll like send you some list with like outrageous prices, and it's like, if you even try to email them to be like, is this still available, or like, when can I come pick this up, they might not even respond. I'm like, this is garbage. I'd rather just pay a little bit extra and get it on like Amazon or something.
Right. Yeah. It feels like records they're so expensive, but like I feel like there's like some hack, and maybe it is Marketplace. Like if you can find the right connection where it's like this stuff should be cheaper, because like it's been around for years, but like I bet you if you were to go and buy Songs for the Deaf, it would probably be like a $45 album if you were to buy it in the store.
Yeah. Well, I kind of looked at when I got My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Some girl put it up on Marketplace, $20. I messaged her. I'm like, no, I think she had it for 25 or something. I'm like, I have a $20 bill in my pocket right now. I can come and get it. She's like, okay. I'm like, all right, got on my card. She lived like 2 streets over or something. I went and got it and came home.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah, especially for that album. That's a great deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just can't wait till everything opens up, because I want to like look through things at stores, like
Yeah, no.
a record player, just to like flip through shit.
I know we've talked about going record hunting together.
So. Yeah, I don't really. I mean, as cheap as it could be going to somebody's garage and finding some records. I just want to go back to a store and do it. Like, let's go to Encore Records downtown or something like that.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
yeah, so I mean, that's all I have. Did you have any final thoughts, or was there anything that you wanted to add that we may have missed?
No, just listen to Queens of the Stone Age, and yeah,
Yeah, this is a good gateway album into them.
yeah, this is a good gateway album, and they're definitely a band. If you even dig like any song you've heard by them on the radio, then you're probably gonna dig their albums because it's really good. And once you get into them, it sort of opens up a whole new world of like rock music in a way.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree. So I guess yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Yeah, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. If you're watching the live stream, and please leave any comments. Any feedback is helpful. If I think we're taking a little bit of a break, right? Nothing related to Ryan missing this week. That was just kind of a free...
Nothing related to Ryan missing. Hopefully, Child Services brings him back to us. We miss our little boy.
Didn't he text saying he was going skydiving, and then we lost connection or something?
I haven't heard from him since, but
they're not. They're just pending my messages. So either way, yeah, we're planning on taking a break, but we'll definitely announce when we'll be releasing more episodes, and we'll be releasing other content, just maybe changing or tweaking things. Looking forward to the future because we are enjoying doing this. I think we just kind of started as like a pandemic thing, but we like the direction that it's going, so we'll keep up with it. But either way, thanks for listening.
And try to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the Essential Albums Podcast, and let us know what albums you want to hear us talk about, or if there's any music you want to hear us, any music you want us to check out, even. Well,
or even review. Yeah, we're willing to do that. So yeah, original music by Ryan Dugal and artwork by Vincent Tran. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.